Hi guys and welcome back to Timeless RC. Today we're going to be building a Tamiya Toyota Toms 84C, which is on the RM01 chassis. So what I'll do is I'll lay all the parts on the bench and then we can begin. Right guys, got all the bits laid on the bench so we can now kick off and begin the build. So the first thing is the tiny chassis, which is so tiny. It's unbelievable when you look at it, but it is a 1/12 scale car, so it's got these sections cut out to make it a bit lighter, but it's fairly rigid, so may look at getting an upgrade chassis for it at some point. At the moment can't do such thing, but I'm sure in the future we can. So let's kick off. So we need some magnetic screwdriver. Those are the... No, that's those ones. And gotcha. Short, stubby little screws. Okay, 2 of those and 2 of those. 1 and 2. Rightio. So, first of all, we need to make sure the chassis is around the correct way. You've got little indents in the bottom of the chassis where the screws, the countersunk screws go, so that it doesn't scrape on the floor. So just make sure you get it around the right way, because obviously the screws will protrude and obviously you will get scratching on the floor. So the first one goes into this to put it onto, and basically all being round, so that's the one. Get that screw through that hole and make sure we get hold of this time without dropping it. Put that on there like so. So it's just a case of tightening them up. And then you'll see the screws are completely flush with the bottom, so you're not going to get any damage to the underside, or you're not going to damage any, if you're sort of running on a hard surface indoors, you're not going to damage that, because obviously the screws countersunk and they're right out of the way. So, first one done. Now we need to take one of the small round bearings that we've, not bearings, the small round ball connectors. Okay, let's get that on that. And the other. Like so. So basically we put those 2 pieces of plastic together, and that will actually hold that little ball connector in to the center of this part. So that will be later used to connect a bolt to, I would imagine. So possibly the suspension, the spring. So we'll see it that later on at point. So we can then take our second part, get 2 more of the small stubby screws. Do the same again as we did in the lower part of the chassis, the main chassis. Put these small ball connectors that is that one, and right. So we need to take 2 of those screws, then we need to mount that on to this section ready by using the 2 screws shown. Put that into there like so. So you have it into the, you've actually got a groove which you can see, and that's got a lock like a nut on it, so that goes into the groove. Then you apply that to the chassis, and then you put your countersunk screw in to both parts, and same the other side, and then we can do that up. That goes like that, and make sure that one's tight too. That then you put together like so. So we cut that off, just tidy it up a bit so it's not any plastic sticking off, but as if you, it looks untidy, but you can also catch your fingers or anything like that when you're in a hurry to pick the car up or something if you've turned over when you're racing. So it's beneficial to do, and we connect that onto both ball connectors, as you can see, like so. You can see that. So we do the same with the other side. Click, click. Right, these ones are Allen key screws, as the same as the ones we used before. So it's just a case of, in the side of the arms, as you can see, there's a little hole for a screw to go in. Now it basically just tightens it up and keeps it attached. It's a little bit of an added safety net for stopping the actual ball joint coming off, but it also still allows you the flexibility. Obviously that's going to twist like so, but not as much as obviously that's shown, but it's just an example. So it's a case of putting one into each of the 4 corners, make sure they're tight, and then we can crack on to the next phase. You don't want to over tighten these, because if you over tighten it, the plastic will strip and you won't be able to tighten it at all. So there we have the first part of the chassis. And as you can see underneath that will be connected to that part, and that actually gives you movement because it's a ball joint. So that's that phase. Right, so we've got our plastic parts. One side, I'm just going to take the knife just to trim that a little bit off, because there's a little tiny bit on there. It's better. Just a little bit tiny more, a bit more. Right, lovely. So we've got one of those, and one of those. So we now need to get the correct screws, and then one side goes into one side which houses the bearing for the axle to go through. It's an oblong shape, so I'm assuming there's an oblong section which fits in there. Then the bearing goes in, so obviously you get your ball races fitted. So let's make sure we get this around the right way. So it's got, I think it's identical both ways. Or no, it's not quite. You'll see on that the upper side is slightly shorter than the other side, so you need to make sure it's around the right way. So it goes that way around. Then we need to make sure we get this on the right way around too. So that goes on like so, and then we put in the screw. Let's get a screw onto the screwdriver. It's always easier that way around. Make sure we get that around the right way again. So that goes into this side, and that will screw into that hole. I'm surprised they're not the thread that you'd normally expect to go into plastic. These are normally what you'd expect to go into nuts and things, so seems an odd screw to use, but I was going to say this, suppose it goes in tighter, but it's not actually going into that one at all, so that's better. Yeah, I suppose it holds it tighter than a normal threaded screw could work loose, so it's got obviously a tighter thread which cuts into the plastic, so that's the only reason I can see why they would do that. So that's like so, and then on the next one, that just goes on there like that. Get that through there ready. That's good. Get that through there ready, like so, and that goes into that bit. One into that end, so the other screw, and one into that side. You can see what I mean now from it being so tiny with the small motor that it comes with. So I might look at getting, you can get a hop-up motor in the same size motor, which is I think it's sport tuned, I think. The same sort of thing as the 540, but obviously smaller. Although I do believe you can fit a 540 motor into this car, so that might be worth looking at as well. Now these little screws are actually Allen key. Right, so that goes into, that's your housing where your motor goes and your axle goes through eventually. Right, so that goes into there like so, and then you screw in from the other side, which is going to be a bit more tricky with this standard Allen key because it's not magnetic. You just thought that the instructions would say do this before you put it together, which actually it does if you look at it, so maybe I should look in future. It's easy to do though, still manage to do it like this, so it's not a problem. Right, you've got to be careful with these sort of screws because you could over tighten it and strip the plastic, so you've got to be, don't push it too far, just sort of go to as tight as you can get it without damaging the threads. So it's just a case of knowing really when to stop, not to be too generous and over tighten it too much. As I say, otherwise you'll strip the thread and then you won't be able to get the screw in to stay in there then, and it will basically, you'd either have to buy another part or put in a thicker screw, and a thicker screw may impede any of the bits that you're going to be putting on, so just something to bear in mind. This is very tricky, being so small. I think we've got it in there now, so let's get that one done up. Like so. Actually, it's a good job I've got the little Allen key, because where I put it together, I don't think my screwdriver would have fitted in there. So there you have it. So you've got to do the same on the bottom, I would think, at a later stage. Maybe not, but I would have thought so. Doesn't actually say it. No, it's obviously just that then, so that can now be mounted to the chassis. So we can move on to that next stage, which goes onto there. That has to go on that side. So if I put the screw through there ready, get it located onto the end of the screw so you know where you're going. And then same again, don't do these too tight because you will strip the thread. So it's a case of when you think it's bitten enough, which that is, and the screw is flush with the chassis mount, you've gone far enough. So let's get that side done. And like so. Lovely. And then the other side, do the same again. Holes are nicely lined up so you know you've got it right. If you put the sides on the incorrect way around, I don't think it would make much difference, but it's when you come to put it together you'll notice the difference then, because you've got a longer side one side and a shorter side the other, and obviously it's not going to mount if it's not correct. So just sort of beware when you're building something like this to make sure that you study the book and build it exactly as per the manual, just to avoid having to take things apart and put them back together again. Lovely. Right, so that's that. Dinky little chassis. Right, next part we need to move on to is the body mounts for this particular section. So what we need to do is take that small, like top head of it's like the top head of a bolt, but it's in plastic. That sits onto there like that. That's two of those done. Then we need to take the side bars, make sure they're around the right way. So take the screw, put the body mount on. Again, this is another tighter threaded screw than it would be as like a normal screw for plastic, but again it's to make sure it stays in tight. So now what I tend to do with my body post is make sure that all the body posts, you've got the holes through the post, and I like to make sure they're all to the side because it's easier to install the body pins, I find, rather than sort of doing it to the front. Not all the time, certain cars you need to do it the other way around, so you've got the pins going from the front to the back or back to the front, whichever. So that's one. But it's personal preference. I mean, the manual tells you to do it a certain way, but everybody does these things differently, so it is really personal choice on how you want it to look. Some people will take the body posts and put magnetic mounts so you don't see any mounts at all. Right, so that one goes into there like that, as I said, so that sort of acts as your damper, and that's got to be greased, obviously. Where's my grease? Anti-wear grease. How do you open these little things? Right, okay, so smother that in this anti-wear grease, and then obviously once it goes into the tube it's going to smother the other parts as well at the same time. Just get a bit of tissue just to wipe the excess off. Obviously we don't want that everywhere, so that then looks like so. So you've got the damper. It's actually got quite a nice, with that grease in it, it's got quite a nice feel to it. And it actually feels like an oil-filled damper, but it's not, so it's good. Yeah, quite impressed with that. Do my grease back up again. Right, now we can add that onto the chassis. It clips on, if I get this right, so it clips on to that part there. And have I missed, okay, I've missed putting in a ball connector. Right, so can we do this without taking the top back off, which I don't think we can. So what we'll do is we'll undo the top of this, because it will spin a bit, being it's on a single screw. Pays to look at the manual first twice before you do things, as you've just seen, because if I don't do it this, it makes it awkward, and that is actually undoing the bottom one as well, so I've got to be careful here. So let's undo that one, like so. Move that round slightly, like that, and we can get in our socket to make sure we get it in the right position. Come here. Back into the top. Like so. Make sure the bottom one's tight again as well. So that's like so. That's got to go on. Just turn it back to the right page. Easy to miss these simplest little things, which then makes the next task a pain, and you've got to take things apart again, so it's always worth looking, as we should have done that time. And that basically just clips onto the top of that ball joint, and it clips to the underside with that ball joint. So you've got your suspension basically. So that's that side done. We can now move on to the front steering arms. So we'll do one at a time, because these are obviously different numbers because of different sides. We need to take the steering section part and place in, if I can pick it up, place in the bar. Now you'll see on the bar it's got a flat side, and if you look in the actual housing it's got a flat side too, so this can only go in one way. So that goes in there, and then put it around that way so we know we're going the right way around. You put your screw through, so we need one of those little boys, which is one of those. So the actual bar that holds the front wheel on has a screw fixing to the rear, so it goes onto the actual housing and then it screws on. I thought looking at it just now, I thought the bolt that we're going to put in does that, but it doesn't. So that, like so, with a little screw in the back, so that's one made up ready. So we then need to put in the screw into the arm, which is going to be the steering mechanism for it. Just make sure it's in the right way around, so it's like so. This is going to have to be screwed into the plastic at first because it's actually quite tight, so need to screw that through like that. And then we can put our washers on. And the way it goes is the thicker washer to the bottom, thinner washer to the top. Not sure if it makes any difference. I can't see what difference it would make unless they're made of a slightly different material and it stops the reaction between the other two types of metal. Yeah, so you can, not sure if you can see, they're slightly different thicknesses. So Then we put on the ball connector and make sure that's done nice and tight. Like so. So there you go. So you've got your front steering arm with your ball connector ready. So we now take the housing for this side. That will then go in there, but you have to have the bar with my friends, the E-clips. Unfortunately, you need to put the bar in first. That's going to make life very awkward, getting an E-clip in there. So, well done Tamiya for making it such an awkward task. Because you've basically got to get the bar in place with your lines on it to get your E-clip on, which I've just dropped. And then push it on somehow with very minimal room. Right guys, managed to work out, well not work out, but managed to get the clips in on the E-clips on the front. Excuse me. Not the easiest of things, because as you can see from the close-up shot, that you've got to put the bar in, then you put the rod, the steering mechanism in, the rod goes right the way through, and then you have to squeeze an E-clip dead either side of that plastic, which was a nightmare, and it took about an hour and a half to actually get it to work. If I'd had an E-clip tool, it'd have been a lot simpler. So something to invest in, I think, for the future. So now that both front arms are made, they can now be installed onto the chassis. So we can take the chassis, which we've already done previously, and making sure we put it on the right way around. Goes one there and one there, and they're bolted on with a nut, a lock nut on the top. So that is the next thing. So I'll get those things sorted out quickly and then we can crack on. There's a BB3. That's the BB1s. So that's BB1. BB3. Come here. Oh. That's that one. And that'll be that one. 2. 3 of those type, and BB1, 2, we've got, and then we want some washers. So the washers are those ones, I believe. Yep. So we need 4 of those. Top. So 2 of those. We need the body posts. Channel 7, W7. then. 4 washers, 2 nuts. Right. Right, so I've got the bolts all laid out, and what we need, also we need to install the 2 front body mounts at the same time, so that's all part of this process. So if we take one off, and we'll start with one side. First of all, we need to take one of the larger bolts. Now we've got all the parts for the next process, which is to install the front arms onto the chassis. So what we need to do is we need to take one of these corner sections that then goes over there like so. Is that side? Yeah. Turn around the right way. So it's got to go like that. Then we put the large bolt through the bottom of the chassis. And that comes right the way through. Then we put on one of the washers, and then the front axle belt, and then the nut. So that holds that in place, and it also gives you a bit of protection on the front to stop damaging your chassis so easily as could be if you hit a stone or something, which is quite good. I like that idea. It's a good idea. Right, so if we do the other one at the same time, so we need to do the same again. So we put on the plastic corner like that. Then we put the bolt through both the chassis and the plastic, the washer. Then on goes the front arm, and that's followed by the lock nut, and that's the first part. So before I do all the bolts up, I will completely put all the bolts into place, so it's less stress on the ones that are tight. If you've got it slightly misaligned, it's so much easier to do it when it's loose rather than to do it when it's tight. You could end up breaking something if you're not careful. So hold on the uprights, body posts. So let's get that on there. Screwdriver. That's just a case of tightening that one up. Like I said when we did the back posts, I've got the back posts running sideways, so I will put the front posts exactly the same direction. It looks tidier when you've got the pins on top of the body shell, I think, to do it that way. So that's just my personal preference. So we won't over tighten that. So we can now put the remaining bolt into the last part, which is one of these small, short, stubby bolts, and a washer has to go in there, which probably would have been easier doing it first, but it's gone in okay, so that's not a problem. Make sure that screw goes in straight. So that's that. Take the spanner and we can then tighten up the first one we put in just to make sure it's tight. One side and get the other side done. We'll do the back bolt first. Get that other screw through there and onto the body post. If the body posts aren't quite aligned, you can always lightly undo the screw and realign afterwards. It's not the end of the story. So it's not oh no, it's done. I can't change it. You can change it. So don't worry too much if it's not quite aligned. So there we have the main part of the chassis. So we've got all, I think I've got to put a screw in there yet still. Double check that. Don't think it's come up yet in the manual, so I has not put it in there yet. So, but as you can see, it's a dinky little chassis, but it's a lovely design. I think it's quite nice. It's got the cutouts obviously to make it slightly lighter than it would be with its full FRP chassis. But yeah, I'm quite impressed with that. So next phase is to move on to the differential. So what I'll do is I'll get the parts out and then we can crack on. Right, so I've got all the parts laid out, got the ball diff grease. The easiest way to do this, to put the bearings in to make them stay in there, is to put some grease to the little hole when the grease comes out. I'll just do it and then I'll show you. Make sure you fill each hole up like so. What it acts as is like a glue, so when you put the bearings in there they don't all fall out the other side, and being so small they are very easy to lose, especially with big hands. So let's go very, very carefully with this. Come on, always one last one, isn't there? Let's get my tweezers. And the best thing to do is use your tweezer and just drop it into place. Like so. You can push them in properly once you've got them all in the hole, or sort of into the part where they've got to go. This just really stops them from falling out everywhere, so it makes your life easier when you're putting the differential together. So that's what, I can get this one out of my hand now. That back in there, like so. We only need that many, so I'll get my tweezers and just push them down to where they're going to be seated. Okay. Like so, and the last one. Right, so they're all in place, as you can see. They're all in. So the next part is to take the washer, which is a diff plate, and we need to put some grease on that. This is exactly the same both ways around, so you can't put it on correctly, which is good, because if you put it together and then you realise you've put the plate in the wrong upside down or something, you then have to take it all back apart and redo it. Let's make sure we get a nice lot of grease onto the plate, like so. The plate will then sit on top of the bearings. That acts as to give you the smooth running. Then we need to take one of the smaller ball bearings, like so, and place that into the centre of that section. That works well. Oh, I see. Need to put the other bit in first. So we need to take the back plate. As you'll notice, the differentials all lovely anodised blue, which I think looks absolutely gorgeous. That's just my opinion, but so we need to put that through like so. Then we need, is there two? Ah, there is two there. So we need to turn that over, put some more ball grease into the ball itself, onto the top of the ball bearings. And then we need to take the other plate, put that on. Then we can put the bottom part of the diff on, and then we can install the bearing. Then it will stay, keep that centralised like so. So that's the first part. And then we need to put another bearing in this side, like so, and then we need to add on that part. So it's a little bar which you have to put in to this section of the metal, but it also goes through that hole there. So you've got to align the hole with that section so that you can, it's a case of finding it, so it should be there, and then it's a case of putting the bar in and squeezing it in. So I need to get a pair of pliers. So that feels lovely and smooth. As you can see, lovely blue anodised. So like that. So we now move on to page 8. So don't do them overly tight, but obviously they need to be tight enough. But it tells you to refer to page 14 for the ground clearance. So let's just have a look and see. Yeah, because you've got different heights, different parts give you different heights. So they're actually showing it with the axle to the top, which would make it quite low. So if we go with 3 with the hole to the top, that will give us quite a low ground clearance. We don't want it high because obviously it's going to be used indoors on carpet. I'm not going to use this outside in the streets because it will damage the chassis. So it will be a carpet racer, if I can find some way to use it, that is. But I do also want to put this against the associated RC12, which I have, which is an original one, and I also have the newer version, which is the, I think it was the L5. So we'll put it against that. And I've also obviously got the Kaishio Phantom kit to build at some point, so we can do a comparison video between all 3 or all 4. So it'll be good. They go in with the larger hole to the outside. That is because then you can put in your ball bearing and you'll have a nice smooth action for the axle, as you can see. And then what we need to do is take the bearings that it shows. That should give us quite a low clearance. This type of car are meant to be low when they're racing, so obviously for the aerodynamics. So that's good. So we've got on the bearing and we've got on the spacer. Then we put on a mounty part. That is too tight, it can't be that one. That's what it looks like there. Definitely looks like that screw, but it just feels really tight. I don't like the sound that's making when I'm trying to do it up. I don't want to damage the alloy. It doesn't feel right. It really doesn't feel right. It's just over worrying. I don't want to split the alloy when I'm putting in an incorrect bolt or something, so just being overly cautious, I suppose. But this is like a clamp, so it clamps the 2 parts together eventually. liking this one a little bit. Just doesn't sound right at all. And that's why it didn't sound right. That's now messed that up. Didn't think that was sounding right. Tamiya, what have you done? You tell you to use a certain screw and then it's not the right screw, so it's now broken off in the alloy, which means I've now got to drill it out and get another screw. So unfortunately guys, that's going to be it for now, and I'll be back in the next video hopefully to be able to crack on with the next part. So until then, happy RCing. If you could like and subscribe to the channel, it would be really appreciated, because the support, the growing support is what grows the channel. So thank you very much for your time.